It all begins when the protagonist, Akane, is having tea with her boyfriend, who tells her that he's in love with another woman. She's not surprised, as he's been distant these past days. After the breakup, she goes back home and talks with her best friend Momo, where we get more insight into what happened. It turns out her ex is a gamer and met the girl through a game. Akane isn't the type to be interested in this kind of entertainment, but her boyfriend had encouraged her to play along with him. However, she is devastated to the point that she stops going to university or working. In an attempt to clear his head, he decides to open the game they used to play together, which is called Foes. That's where she realizes that her ex not only blocked her on social media, but also removed her from his in-game friends list and abandoned the clan they were in together. In that moment, she regrets having spent over 3,000 yen buying things in the game just to have fun with him. Despite this, she continues playing, hoping it might help her clear her head. As she progresses, she encounters one of the players from her new clan, Yamada. He seems quite rude to her. She tries to strike up a conversation, but it takes him several minutes to reply with simple responses like yes and hi. Despite this, Akane decides to vent to Yamada about her breakup, telling him what happened with her ex. Yamada simply responds that he understands the situation and says that if she isn't looking for rare items or leveling up, she should let him hunt in the area and stay out of his way. This infuriates Akane, who tells him she won't give up the area. Yamada remains indifferent, so she insults him and logs off. Shortly after, she receives a notification from the game's developers inviting her to a real-life event. Determined to make her ex realize what he lost by leaving her for some random girl he met in a video game, Akane decides to attend the event, dressed as beautifully as possible, assuming he'll be there with his new girlfriend. Upon arriving at the event, she hears a girl calling her boyfriend, which makes her instinctively run to greet him. In her rush, she trips over a guy and falls to the ground. The young man helps her up and apologizes, but she brushes it off, thinking he's quite handsome. He seems only concerned about her well-being and remains indifferent otherwise, which leads her to realize that he's Yamada, the same character from the game. Once they recognize each other, Akane's ex appears, excitedly telling Yamada how much he admires him, watches all his videos, and loves the way he plays, completely ignoring Akane. When her ex finally notices her, he asks why she's there, since she doesn't like games. Akane quickly fabricates a story, claiming Yamada is her boyfriend. To keep up the ruse, she hands him a card to claim one of the rarest items in the game, leaving her ex speechless. However, his current girlfriend is quite understanding, and even though he was heartbroken, she helped and consoled him, which makes Akane regret how strong their new relationship is. Feeling down, Akane invites Yamada for drinks, though he clearly just wants to leave. He stays out of obligation given the favor she did him. Here, Akane starts to learn more about Yamada. He tells her he gets paid to play FPS games and only plays Foes to relax. He also mentions that he's not interested in romantic relationships, which surprises her because he's quite good looking. Akane excuses herself to the bathroom, where she regrets attending the event and notices that due to her fall, her clothes are dirty and she has a scratch on her leg. When she returns, Yamada is gone. Thinking he abandoned her, she nearly cries, but then he suddenly appears behind her. He had just gone to buy her a bandage for her leg. Relieved, she asks him to stay and continue drinking. The next morning, she wakes up in Yamada's bed. Akane feels confused, but Yamada tells her that nothing happened between them. She just passed out from drinking too much, so he took her home because it felt inhumane to leave her on the street. He washed her clothes, which she had thrown up on, and let her sleep in his bed while he played games all night. Embarrassed, she says goodbye and leaves. When she gets home, she starts reflecting on her life and realizes she lost a necklace her ex-boyfriend had given her. She searches everywhere for it, thinking Yamada might have it at his place. She logs into the game, but he's offline. Princess Ruri shows up and asks why she looks so down. Akane tells her what happened with her ex. While they're talking about the gifts Princess Ruri receives, Yamada logs on. Akane tries to talk to him in the chat, but Ruri keeps asking her in-game questions, so Akane sends Yamada a private message. Surprisingly, he replies in seconds, saying he hasn't seen the necklace. Yamada then focuses on the guild inventory and complains that someone is filling it with junk, making it his responsibility to clean it up and make space for important items. During their conversation, they realize it's Akane who's been cluttering the inventory with junk. Yamada scolds her, which annoys her, and she logs off in a fit of rage, yelling that she hates Yamada. Meanwhile, after Yamada logs out of the game, he finds the necklace in his room. Unfortunately, it's too late because he steps on it and breaks it. Akane falls asleep and dreams about her ex-boyfriend. In the dream, he tells her he made a mistake and wants her back, offering her a gift. But the gift suddenly turns into his current girlfriend, causing Akane to wake up startled. The next day, she goes out with Momo and tells her everything that happened. Momo dismisses the dream, saying it doesn't matter. All she wants to know is more about the handsome gamer. She also tells Akane that she shouldn't be searching for a gift from the man who left her for someone else, and that she should have more self-respect. These words hit Akane like a bullet. On her way home, Akane starts thinking about what to do since she doesn't feel like watching TV and playing alone is boring. That's when she overhears Yamada's voice and notices a couple of girls talking to him. It turns out they're trying to confess their feelings for him, but he doesn't understand and tells them they can say whatever they want some other day because he has to go fight a boss. Akane approaches him and tells him he should study humans more and games less, to which he replies that he hears that a lot. Akane learns that Yamada is quite smart based on the school uniform he's wearing. While she's analyzing him, Yamada tells her that he wanted to see her again, making her blush. Then Yamada shows her the broken necklace, apologizing for stepping on it after finding it much later than their previous conversation. Akane reassures him, saying he doesn't need to worry because she was planning to throw it away anyway. She then bids him farewell in the middle of a rainstorm. Noticing the rain, Yamada shouts after her and runs over, giving her an umbrella and telling her not to worry about returning it. They part ways again. When Akane gets home, her mother sends her all her childhood belongings, saying she's turning her room into an entertainment space. Now Akane is overwhelmed with junk, so she calls Momo to help her clean up. While doing so, she remembers Yamada's words from the game, when he told her to only store what's important in the chest. Inspired, Akane decides to throw away everything she doesn't need and then goes out for drinks with her friend. Later that night, they show up at Yamada's house and Akane returns the umbrella. Momo, completely drunk, throws herself at Yamada, calling him handsome and asking if he wants to date her. Yamada calmly says he'll call the police. Akane hands him the umbrella and thanks him for everything he's done since the event. As she says goodbye and starts to leave, Yamada can't help himself and asks if she ever wants to play again. He can accompany her, as Ruri has been worried since Akane stopped logging in after their argument. She agrees to his offer. After some time, Momo invites Akane to a group date where she meets a guy who loves playing video games and asks her if she wants to be his girlfriend as he's quite a catch. However, this scares her off. He's not familiar with Foes, the only game she knows, so the night drags on. Despite this, she manages to chat calmly with Ruri, to whom she gave her phone number. Momo questions whether it's safe to do that, pointing out that Ruri could be a 40-year-old man for all she knows. However, Akane is determined to meet her online friends in person. On her way home, she sees a girl in a bunny outfit that reminds her a lot of Ruri, but dismisses it. After eating and taking a bath, she decides to play for a while, only to find that her friends are offline since it's a weekday. After a while, she finds Ruri and Yamada chatting in the guild chat. Not realizing that she's reading their conversation, she notices that they seem quite close, which makes her feel uncomfortable. When Yamada logs off, Ruri says she'll call them later, confirming that they have a friendship outside the game. As time goes on, Akane becomes more interested in Yamada but doesn't want to bother him or anything like that. After leaving university, Akane runs into the guy she met earlier in the chapter. Even though she doesn't remember his name, she decides to chat with him on the way home to avoid being rude. He mentions that he started researching Foes and wanted to give it a try. As they chat, Akane spots Yamada in the distance and sees a young girl approach him and take his arm. She realizes it's Ruri since only she is that close to him. Thinking they're a couple, Akane feels bad but doesn't understand why, so she rushes home. Depressed, Akane doesn't feel like playing, but Ruri messages her, asking her to meet up at a new event the Foes developers are hosting. She reluctantly agrees even though she doesn't want to go. On the day of the event, she gets lost but bumps into a guy who's also headed there, and she immediately likes him. She remains distant while he compliments her and says how much he likes the game and that he didn't expect to see such a pretty girl there. Akane tells him she's still a newbie and talks about her guild, making the guy instantly recognize who she is. Then a girl greets them from a cafe, the same one who was with Yamada when Akane was on her way home. Akane searches for Yamada with her eyes, and when she spots him, she rushes over to greet him, but the girl takes his arm and gives Akane a nasty look. Once inside the cafe, Akane starts to notice how the guild members interact and feels quite happy about the atmosphere they create. She approaches the girl, calling her Princess Ruri, and asks who the other young people are and if they're part of the guild. The girl responds that her character's name isn't Princess Ruri and asks Akane who she is. Akane insists that she must be Ruri, as there's no other girl at the table, but the girl firmly denies it and keeps asking who Akane is. Then Yamada steps in and tells Ada, the young man who bumped into her, that they should introduce themselves. Ada agrees with Yamada and reveals that he is Princess Ruri. Akane is disturbed, realizing that a man is playing a female character, and that she had shared some very personal details about her relationship with him, assuming Ruri was a woman. Ada reassures her not to worry, saying that she really confided in Princess Ruri, not him, and that her stories will stay between the fictional characters. Another man, who looks quite a bit older, introduces himself next. His name is Takezo, and his in-game character shares the same name. After that, they introduce Runa, the real-life model for Princess Ruri. She interjects, commenting that she can't understand what kind of guy like Ida would base a video game character on his sister. Then Runa turns her attention to Akane and asks her how she knows Yamada. He tries to brush it off by saying it's a complicated answer, but Akane quickly responds that they met at an event. Runa then mentions that she's surprised Akane is in contact with both Yamada and Ida, considering that in the game they seemed like a couple. Without much reaction, Yamada explains that they went to the same school, though he's older, which is why he allows her to treat him that way. Akane feels relieved and remarks that she thought he had lied about never having had a girlfriend, to which Yamada asks why he would lie about something like that. Akane blurts out, "Thank goodness," and immediately falls silent, paralyzed by her own response. Runa, who's sitting across from her, asks why Akane said "thank goodness" and confronts her, accusing her of liking Yamada. But her brother quickly intervenes, telling her not to speak to someone older like that. Runa snaps back, telling him not to lecture her, considering he's a man playing a female character. At that moment, Takezo manages to steer the conversation toward what they're going to eat, asking if they've decided on their orders. Akane picks up a glass of water and notices Yamada looking at her, which makes her nervous, causing the glass to fall to the floor. She bends down to pick it up, but Yamada stops her. He tells her she could cut herself on the glass and that she should wait for a staff member to clean it up. Akane remains crouched on the floor, facing away from him, feeling tense and unsure of what to do. Noticing the tension, Yamada gets up and says he's going to make a call. A few minutes later, Ida gets up, saying he's going to the bathroom, but steps outside to confirm that Yamada isn't actually making a call. Ida remarks that it's unusual for him to lie and admits to his friend that he felt like leaving her alone when he saw her on the floor. They then begin to talk about Yamada's disinterest in women and how Ida is starting to worry that Yamada will remain single forever. The meeting continues and eventually, everyone has to leave, so they say their goodbyes. Everything seems to go well, but Runa is very jealous of Akane and vows to do whatever it takes to get her out of the guild. When the group splits up, Akane takes the train home with Yamada. She notices that a lot of women are looking their way, but after a while, she realizes they're actually staring at Yamada. At that moment, she recalls that even she initially thought he was very handsome. As they get off the train, she asks if he plans to have dinner, and he mentions that he'll have flan tonight. Hearing this and realizing they're near her home, she asks him to wait a moment. She rushes down to her place and comes back with all sorts of food she had prepared. He tells her he doesn't want to be a bother, but she insists that he accept the gift. Suddenly, Runa calls and apologizes for her rude behavior, saying she'd like to meet up with Akane to clear the air. Akane is open to the idea and feels happy about the possibility of getting along with Ida's sister, so they agree to meet on Saturday. After hanging up, she tells Yamada, who smiles, pleased to know she's becoming more involved with the group. On Saturday, we see Yamada adjusting his mouse at his computer when Ida calls to ask if he's going to Runa's class. Yamada replies that he thought it had been cancelled, remembering the conversation Akane had with her. However, Ida clarifies that it wasn't, and they're expecting him there. Meanwhile, we see Akane on a date with a guy from Foes, who mentions that he didn't expect Princess Ruri to be a woman, as in his experience, 100% of the time they've been men. Akane assures him that she isn't Ruri, but the guy ignores her and blurts out that he loves her. At that moment, Runa sends Akane a message saying something came up, and she won't be able to make it but hopes Akane has fun. After receiving the message, Akane excuses herself, telling the guy she's going to the bathroom, and starts to wonder what's going on. Suddenly, we switch to Yamada, who greets Ada's mother and heads upstairs to Runa's room, as he's her private tutor. When Runa sees him, she greets him enthusiastically, but he remains serious and confronts her, asking if she isn't supposed to be somewhere else right now. She denies it, so he lets it go. However, at that moment, Akane calls her. Runa quickly hides her phone and repeats that she doesn't need to be anywhere. Meanwhile, Akane is sitting in a public bathroom, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, the boy appears in the bathroom and asks if he is okay. She is surprised and reminds him that he is in a women's space, but he doesn't listen and tries to open the bathroom door. Back in Runa's room, Yamada tells her that it wasn't right to ditch Akane. She excuses herself, saying that a friend of hers is there, so there's no problem. But Yamada manages to get the truth out of her. She messaged a fan of Princess Ruri from her brother's computer and invited him to meet Akane. Yamada asks where the meeting is, but Runa refuses to tell him. He insists, saying what she did was dangerous, then heads toward the door. As he opens it, he sees Ida and tells him everything that happened. They check the computer and discover the location of the meeting, so Yamada calls Takezo to drive them there in his truck. They're all very worried about her, but when they arrive at the cafe, they find Akane with the guy, seemingly without any problems. Takezo rushes over and tells the guy to leave her alone. While Takezo is giving the guy a lecture, Akane notices that Ida and Yamada are also there and greets them. They ask her what happened to her leg as it's bandaged. The guy interrupts and apologizes, explaining that it was his fault for scaring her in the women's bathroom. Ida takes a dominant stance, questioning the guy. It turns out that he thought Akane had fainted in the bathroom, which is why he barged in. He only wanted to give her some medicine. Akane was frightened because he tried to open the door, but in the end he slid the pills under the door, and in her shock, she kept her leg on the toilet. Yamada apologizes to Akane for not telling her that he's Runa's tutor, which could have prevented the situation, but she reassures him that there's no need to apologize. Then she glances toward the back and sees Runa, who is visibly embarrassed and runs away before Akane can say a word. Akane tries to follow her, but because of her injury, she stumbles and falls to the ground. Runa notices that Akane is hurt and comes back, kneeling beside her and asking for forgiveness, although her brother still scolds her. Akane pretends to have a stomachache and asks the boys to go to a pharmacy 500 meters away to get her some medicine. They all start heading out when she suddenly asks Runa to rub her stomach. Akane uses this moment to be alone with her and settle their differences, as well as chat about the game. The next chapter begins by giving us a deeper understanding of Runa, detailing her family background, likes, and dislikes. At school, she comes across as quite aloof, the type of girl who doesn't hang out with others. However, he doesn't mind his physical loneliness because he has more than 300 friends online with whom he spends most of the day. When it comes to boys, being a beautiful young girl, she has no trouble catching their attention. However, she tends to push them away when they see her in her anime outfits. As for her own preferences, her standards are very high because her brother and Yamada are both handsome, so she doesn't like the boys in her class. Despite being solitary and not leaving her comfort zone for years, meeting Akane changed everything. She started visiting her frequently after school, but soon realized that her relationship with Akane is different from the one she has with her brother or Yamada. Akane doesn't spoil her or do everything she wants, but she's the first older friend Runa has had. With Akane, it's much easier to step out of her comfort zone, making her go outside and do things Runa initially thought were silly, like doing weird dances. One day, they invited Momo to join them while they were playing games, but Momo isn't into gaming, so she started talking about how she wants to fall in love, get married, and have kids, just like her mother who did so at 20 years old. Since Akane had just reached level 50, she wasn't paying much attention. As for Runa, she's a girl who has no interest in love, so Momo got upset. Akane continued playing while they argued, and soon after, the conversation shifted to Yamada. Akane commented that Yamada is surprisingly kind, which Runa responded that he's always been that way, even helping her with her exams despite being busy with his own responsibilities. At that moment, Yamada logged into the game and Akane greeted him, asking why he hadn't logged in earlier. She told him about her progress and that she had done everything he recommended. Yamada was cold at first, but later softened up and became friendlier. Akane is also maturing a lot as she doesn't feel bad about his indifference anymore. She understands and accepts it. After talking with him, Momo jumped on her, begging her to stop playing and start going on dates. But Akane insisted that playing games was more fun and convinced Momo to give it a try, even though she knew nothing about computers. When Momo touched the mouse, the computer suddenly exploded and smoke started coming out. Akane was left without a computer for a while, which made her quite sad. So Ida asked Yamada to visit her and fix it. Here we see that although Runa was jealous of Akane a few days ago, she is now helping her brother to encourage a relationship between Yamada and Akane. Runa tried many strange things to no avail, until at one point she got fed up and pushed Akane against Yamada, which ended up hurting his eye. Akane immediately got worried and leaned over him without thinking, but soon realized they were too close, and she was touching his face. Suddenly, Yamada got up and said he needed to go home because he hadn't brought any tools to open her computer. Akane told him not to go as it was too far, but he left anyway, shutting the door behind him. Then we see Yamada's perspective when Akane accidentally hurts his eye. As he opens it, he notices she's way too close. Making him feel uncomfortable and unsure of how to act, he simply leaves the apartment and takes a moment to reflect while sitting on the ground before heading to a nearby store. When he leaves the store, the young cashier comments that he always buys the same brand of tea, one of the best. He responds curtly and walks away, but before he's out of sight, she shouts from the register, saying she remembers him from the academy, as she also studied there, and would like to know his name. Yamada finds the situation strange and tells her no, as he's in a hurry, which leaves the cashier feeling awkward. He reflects on the interaction, recalling a conversation he once had with Ida, but he still doesn't understand any of it. So he concludes that it's better to stay away from women to avoid hurting them or causing any unnecessary issues. When Yamada returns to the apartment, he finds Akane and Runa asleep. To avoid waking them, he works silently. As he opens his tool bag, a screwdriver flies out and lands near Akane, but it doesn't touch her. He carefully picks it up, trying to continue working, but finds himself unable to take his eyes off her. Out of nowhere, he removes her hair clip to see how she looks with her hair down. He's mesmerized for a few seconds until someone rings the doorbell. Yamada goes to answer it only to find Akane's ex-boyfriend, who's shocked to see him and asks if he's really Akane's boyfriend. Not intending to lie, Yamada says no, which makes the ex-boyfriend feel more confident. He tells Yamada that he's a big fan and follows him on social media. After that, he hands over the plastic containers that Akane used to give him, filled with homemade food, asking Yamada to return them to her, but without mentioning that he brought them. Then he leaves. Yamada tries to fulfill the request, but Akane had been listening to the entire conversation behind the door. They head back inside, and Yamada hands her the hair clip, apologizing and explaining that he took it while she was asleep. Akane feels confused, especially when he admits that he doesn't know why he did it. He just wanted to. After Yamada finishes fixing the computer, Akane decides to get a job to repay Ida for the new components. She asks him how much they cost, but he tells her it's a secret, and that she doesn't need to pay anything, though this makes her feel a bit uneasy. Next, we see Yamada taking out the trash at his institute, with all the girls watching him. Suddenly, one of his classmates approaches him and invites him to participate in an upcoming festival. The classmate also notices how all the girls are looking at Yamada and wonders what it will be like when he finally gets a girlfriend, predicting that the girls in their class will be deeply disappointed. At that moment, some girls shout from the second-floor window, telling him that his phone has been ringing non-stop. Yamada heads upstairs, where he finds a towel on his desk. A girl sitting nearby, reading a book, tells him that she put the towel there because the phone's vibrations were bothering her. Yamada apologizes and hands the towel back to her. She then mentions that she watched one of his recent matches and comments that his skills are slipping because of his time spent playing foes. He ignores her and checks his phone, finding messages from Ida. It turns out the guild wants to attend the upcoming festival at the academy, but they need Yamada's help to get certain permissions. Ida sent him a list of participants, which includes himself, Takezo, Runa, and Akane. Yamada finds it strange that Akane is listed as a sponsor. The long-awaited day of the festival had finally arrived. Akane arrived later than the others because she now had responsibilities at the convenience store where she got a job. Runa held her hand as they walked through the festival and saw Ada, who was wearing bunny ears. From a distance, he shouted for them to wait, but the girls picked up their pace. Once everyone was together, they decided they wanted to go into a haunted house, but the girls didn't want to, so the boys went in alone. Meanwhile, Akane and Runa walked through the institution's hallway so Runa could get to know the academy where she would be taking her entrance exams. Runa was nervous because the academy had a reputation for being very demanding, but Akane reassured her, telling her she was capable of passing. Despite Akane's encouragement, Runa began to feel a strong stomachache, so Akane took her to the bathroom. While waiting for her outside, Ida sent Akane a message letting her know that they had already come out of the haunted house and would meet in 15 minutes. Akane wondered if Yamada was with them but didn't want to ask Ida to avoid any misunderstandings. Suddenly, she saw some boys organizing boxes in a nearby classroom, and among them was Yamada. Excited to see him, Akane tried to call out to him, but her voice unexpectedly cracked. As Yamada disappeared from view, she slowly lowered her arm, confused about why she couldn't greet him as usual. Meanwhile, Yamada entered the room, organized some boxes, and asked the delegate if he could step out for a moment. Worried because Runa still hadn't come out of the bathroom, Akane turned to enter, but just as she was about to, Yamada placed his hand on her shoulder to greet her. Akane was excited to see him and asked if he had seen her earlier. Yamada said he had, but he didn't greet her because he was busy. They then started talking about Runa's condition and why Akane was alone. Yamada offered to take Runa to the infirmary. They discovered that Runa hadn't eaten anything since the day before, which was probably causing her stomachache. Yamada was about to tell Ida about the situation, but Runa grabbed his phone and begged him not to, as she feared Ida would send her home and she wanted to have fun and eat. Akane offered to get her food and anything else she needed, so Runa gave her a rather long list. Since Akane wasn't familiar with the academy, Yamada offered to accompany her. As they walked toward the festival, they noticed that everyone was staring and whispering. Akane felt embarrassed, but Yamada remained as expressionless as ever. Then the gym teacher approached and started chatting with Yamada. When he noticed Akane, he commented that he was happy Yamada had found a girlfriend since he was worried Yamada didn't have one. This remark caused an immediate reaction from the nearby girls, who began interrogating Akane, surprised that she was a university student and asking Yamada if he liked older women and if that was why he had never shown interest in anyone from the academy. After finally shaking off the curious girls, Akane and Yamada sat on a bench until Takezo and Ida arrived. Once they heard what had happened, Ida, always the joker, said he would have loved to see the disappointed faces of the girls. Then, looking at Akane, Ida jokingly suggested that if people were going to treat her like that for being friends, she and Yamada might as well start dating. Ida turned to Yamada and asked what he thought. Yamada, playing along, said it might be a good idea. Suddenly, they noticed that Akane was being unusually quiet. When they looked at her, they saw that her face was as red as a tomato. Akane stood up abruptly, saying she needed to go get food for Runa, and rushed away, but not before telling Ida she hated him. Yamada ran after her. Akane ran through the hallways, bumping into several people, but in the end, Yamada caught up with her. Before she could run away again upon seeing him, Yamada shouted for her to be careful going down the stairs. Akane stopped and let him approach. They tried to talk, but a crowd began to form around them, so Akane grabbed his hand and led him to a secluded area. There, Yamada apologized and they began discussing the situation. Even though they agreed it was all a joke, Akane asked him what he would have done if she had taken it seriously. For a moment, she wanted to hear his answer, but since Yamada took so long to respond, she became frustrated and tried to leave. However, Yamada told her it would be an honor, as someone like her was unattainable for a guy like him. Later, Yamada visits Akane at the convenience store. On his way home from school, he buys the processed meats and foods he always eats. She tells him he should improve his diet, but he pays no attention to her advice. Akane's boss approaches her and asks about Yamada. Noting that he is a very handsome young man, she questions if Yamada is her boyfriend, but Akane says no, considering that he doesn't show any direct attraction to women. They both head home, but as they walk, Akane reflects on her feelings and tells herself that it's not right to consider Yamada as a potential boyfriend. Lost in her thoughts while waiting for the traffic light to change, Akane is almost hit by a bicycle. Yamada pulls her closer to protect her from harm. Later, Akane is at a nail salon with Momo, discussing everything that has happened recently with Yamada, though she doesn't specify it's him. Akane insists that kind guys are quite dangerous because you never really know if they like you or not. They just leave you intrigued. Momo understands that Akane must be talking about someone in particular, and says that if a younger guy told her she was unattainable like that, she wouldn't hesitate to go after him. At this point, Runa calls Akane to talk. It's already evening, so Akane is surprised to see Runa alone in a park. Runa reassures her that she took a taxi there and would take another one to leave, which eases Akane's worry a bit. They then talk about a new girl joining the guild, who is Yamada's friend and is very possessive of her. Runa is concerned that this might ruin her current friendships as she has built strong bonds with the current members and doesn't want things to fall apart again. Akane calms Runa down by assuring her that their friendship won't be affected by the arrival of a new girl and that they can all get along and hang out together. Since Yamada hasn't given Runa any information about this new girl, Runa asks Akane to talk to him to see if she can find out more. Runa then gives Akane Yamada's number. Next, we see Yamada's class representative, who is interested in playing foes. She arrives in class and sits next to Yamada and another friend. They start chatting about their love for video games and ask why he keeps it a secret. But Yamada says it's not a secret. It's just that girls only talk about having boyfriends. She then asks Yamada if he's interested in having a girlfriend, but he says he has no special interest in that. Suddenly, an unknown phone number starts calling him, but he doesn't pay much attention. When he and his friends are on their way home, Yamada takes a moment to call the number, which turns out to be Akane's. He's surprised and asks if he had ever given her his number, but she explains that it was Runa who gave it to her and apologizes for the inconvenience. At this point, Akane is getting ready for work because the employee who was supposed to take the night shift didn't show up, and her boss needed help at the convenience store. After hanging up, the class representative asks Yamada about Akane to get to know her better, but he struggles to describe her, only recalling their shared experiences. She asks if he likes her, but Yamada simply ignores the question. Days pass, and it's Saturday. Runa is having a class with Yamada. She takes a moment to talk to Akane, who feels unwell, and mentions that Yamada's voice sounded strange. This concerns Akane, who, after the class ends, heads home. Akane is feeling extremely ill, unable to eat or drink water due to a sore throat and unable to stand. She tries to ask for help but has no phone signal. She attempts to go out despite her cold and headache to get something to eat, but collapses on the way. Fortunately, Yamada is nearby and finds her, rescuing her in his arms. After rescuing Akane from the ground, Yamada takes her to his apartment to try to bring down her fever. That same day, his friends are waiting for him and try to call him, but he ignores them. Seeing that he isn't responding, they continue on their way. Yamada then tells the class representative that if she doesn't do something, someone else will come and take Yamada's love away. She assures him that it's clear, but it's also noticeable, that Yamada keeps his distance from women. Next, we see what's happening in Akane's room. She has a high fever and Yamada is doing his best to bring it down. Despite his efforts, he fails and asks her about her health insurance card. He carries her to the hospital, where she receives the necessary injections to stop the fever. Later, Akane wakes up in her room feeling a bit unwell and thinking it might have all been a dream. However, when she looks over, she sees Yamada sleeping on the floor next to her bed. She gets up and opens the window to see better. Realizing that it's not a dream, Yamada wakes up from the breeze and begins to ask how she feels, although Akane doesn't understand him. He explains everything that happened, while she feels bad about all of her previous thoughts about him when she first met him. He assures her that he isn't as good as she thinks. Then he gives her a yogurt he bought for her to eat. She tries to have some, but it hurts too much to swallow, so she returns it to him. However, while attempting to eat, Akane experiences a sharp pain in her leg. Yamada tells her to stretch it, but she is in agony on the bed, so he takes her leg to help alleviate the pain. When he manages to relieve it, they both end up sitting on the bed. gazing at each other with only the moonlight illuminating their faces. At this point, Yamada extends his arm toward Akane, who suddenly moves back to avoid him. He was simply reaching for the spoon she was using to eat, to put away the yogurt, and starts to smile at her reaction. After the long night they had, Yamada left early for home and Momo took over for him. She brought some food and Akane started telling her everything that happened the previous night, emphasizing how heroically Yamada had saved her. While Momo listened, she wondered internally if it's possible for a guy to do that for a woman he doesn't like, as it seems like too much effort for anyone. Momo considers that Akane isn't thinking about this because she is still recovering, so she decides to keep quiet. However, before saying goodbye to her friend, Momo advises her to be attentive to love, as it might be where she least expects it. Akane returns to her regular routine of university and work, but after catching up on everything, she decides to log into Foes, where she encounters the class representative Ada. They start chatting, and Akane notices that she isn't a complete novice to gaming, but this doesn't bother her, and they become friends from the get-go. After introducing herself, the class representative explains the advantages of paladins, herself and Akane, over mages, Ada and Yamada. And then they go hunting, facing a boss. Ida doesn't help them, considering it one of the weaker ones, so he leaves the work to them. However, as he allows them to interact to become friends, the girls are unable to defeat the boss. If it weren't for him reviving them, they would have lost a long time ago. After failing, Akane logs off to call Yamada immediately, and they talk about what happened. Meanwhile, the class representative is chatting with Ida and comments that everyone in the guild is quite nice. This makes her feel bad, as her reason for joining the game was selfish. Ida simply tells her that if she has something she needs to do, she should do it and not be left with doubts about what might happen. As they chat, Akane and Yamada have been talking for a while, and he asks her what else she wants to talk about since she's already told him everything she knew about the boss. She simply responds that she just wanted to hear his voice, and then hangs up amidst a sea of uncontrollable emotions. She then calls Momo to meet in person, arranging to meet at a fancy cafe. When they're there, some young men Momo had previously dated arrive and make them quite uncomfortable, but luckily for them, Ida works there and helps Akane get rid of them. Momo is immediately smitten just by seeing him and tells Akane that the game she is in is much more promising than group dates. Akane asks Momo why her ex left her. She wants to start a new relationship but doesn't feel secure about it, as she wants to resolve any bad habits before dating a new guy. As the day goes on, Akane clears all of her doubts with Momo and waits outside for Ida to finish work so she can tell him the same. When he is changing to go out, one of the young women who works with him asks him to join her and some friends at a karaoke bar, but he refuses, saying he needs to go with his sister, despite her insistence. When he exits the cafe, Akane intercepts him and asks if they can talk. Momo, Ida, and Akane go to a nearby park, where Akane sits next to Ida, while Momo watches from a distance. Ada asks if she's planning to confess her feelings, given how she approached him, but she denies it, saying it's for another reason. Minutes pass, and Akane struggles to find the right words, so Momo shouts that she's in love. Ida figures out who it is and tells her she doesn't need to say it. He starts to mention that he knows the guy she's in love with and that he's a good person even if he doesn't have many social skills. He also recalls the day he found her wandering around Foes, and he assumes that's the day her boyfriend broke up with her. Ida tells her not to hold back. If she has feelings for Yamada, she should go tell him. If things don't work out, she'll always have Momo and Princess Ruri comfort her. Hearing this, Akane thanks them both and rushes to Yamada's apartment. We see Akane running to Yamada's home. When she arrives at his door, she can't find the words. She tries to talk outside, but it's too noisy. As she hesitates, Yamada tells her he doesn't have time as he needs to go to the academy. Anything she needs to say can be done over the phone. Caught up in her thoughts, she doesn't notice when he moves closer and shuts the door behind them, leaving them near each other. Yamada says he's going to change, and when Akane notices he's taking off his shirt, she quickly looks away. But he does it so fast that by the time she turns back, he's already done. They both head to the subway. Yamada wonders what she wants to say, noticing she seems very distracted. At the station, he apologizes for not being able to listen to her, but mentions he's in a hurry and needs to leave. Before heading down, he quickly turns back and says that if she has time, she can call him after he finishes at the academy. She agrees, heading home happily. At the academy, it starts to rain, but fortunately, Yamada has an umbrella. However, he has to choose between taking his friend or the class representative. The friend wants the representative to go with him so they can talk about their feelings, but she is unsure about it. After some time, they finally decide, and Yamada's friend lets the representative take the spot and go with him. As they walk, Yamada gives the umbrella to the representative and tells her to use it while he runs ahead because he's in a hurry. She panics and asks him to wait, running after him but accidentally bumping into someone, causing her glasses to fall and break. Unable to see in the rain and darkness, Yamada arrives to help her. He then confesses his feelings, leaving Yamada stunned. We see Akane in her room when suddenly Yamada sends her a message. He says he can't hear her right now, so they'll have to talk another time. We then see him in class with Runa, where Ida arrives and asks if a girl confessed to him. Yamada asks how he knows, but Ida avoids the question, pressing him to give an answer so she won't be left with false hopes. After class, he heads to the minimarket where Akane works. The boss informs her that the handsome guy is outside, so she quickly goes to meet him but notices he seems different. During their conversation, Yamada opens up to Akane about why he's so solitary and doesn't talk much, claiming he's a boring guy. But she tells him the opposite, as she loves spending time with him and adores him. She also says he's always willing to help others, just like he has helped her. After this conversation, Yamada regains his resolve and meets with the class representative, ending the chapter with them facing each other. After that, Yamada and Sabaki meet. As she is ready to confess her feelings, she tells him how much she admires and loves every part of him. His way of playing, his eyelashes, how he treats others, and even how she loves when he gazes out of the classroom window. After saying all of this, Sabaki feels relieved, as if she has released a great burden. Even though she might be rejected, she feels good for finally having told the truth. Yamada, being very honest, apologizes but says he cannot reciprocate her feelings at that moment. Sabaki notices that Yamada has something in his hand. It's the drawing she did for Akane. Yamada explains that it was done by someone he knows. Sabaki smiles and says she knows who drew it, then asks if it's the girl he likes. Yamada confidently confirms that it is, and Sabaki understands. In fact, she already knew, because even though no one else noticed, she began to see how Yamada was gradually changing. In the end, she thanks him for listening and bids him farewell. A few days later, the guild members gather for a barbecue. When they arrive, Ida mentions that Sabaki couldn't come and that Yamada will be a bit late. Since Takezo is somewhat famous and has many connections, they end up getting a lot of food and even a bottle of alcohol, which Akane ends up drinking. When Yamada arrives, he finds Akane extremely drunk. Ida suggests that he should accompany her home. On the way, Akane's heel gets stuck in the ground and Yamada helps her out, leading to a touching moment where she takes his hand. After this, he takes her home and leaves. However, Akane chases after him and, without hesitation, asks if he likes her, as she felt that way. Yamada, with a big smile, says that if it's noticeable, then yes, he does like her, and he doesn't mind if she forgets by tomorrow, as he will keep reminding her until she remembers. Akane can't help but cry and says that when she wakes up tomorrow, she will think it was all a dream, so she asks if she can call him. Yamada, upon hearing this, hugs her and says not to worry, as he will call her himself. True to his word, as soon as she wakes up, he calls her, and shortly after, they start dating. And that's the end of this anime.